Let's look at yet another enhancement of the missing operators project from the YByte Python course available at www.ybyte.in. Notice here I'm asking a question, but unlike earlier, I have not just plus and minus, but also a multiplication. The answer to this question is, uh, because I'm printing it here, so I know this, the answer is minus, plus, and let's say multiply. And I can verify that because 66 minus 27 uh, plus 7 um, times 84 is indeed 627, as I can see it here. Now the point is, how do I get this operator which is of a higher precedence compared to the plus and minus? In this video, we'll see it in a very step-by-step manner. We first understand the challenge that is involved. Next, we'll understand what are the different options that we have for solving it, and we'll develop one of those two options here through this program. Really, the challenge is about computing the right hand side. Just take as an example, for example, if I had, let's say, 2 plus 3 minus 4. Now, in this case, it does not matter how long the question is. Since plus and minus are the same precedence, I can just compute the result from the left side sequentially. The moment I put a multiply operator, however, that changes, because now, even in the simple question, I cannot compute 2 plus 3 and then multiply that by 4, because multiplication has a higher precedence, as we know, and which means that it must be computed before I can compute the remaining part of the sum. Now, the whole idea is that in fact, this is what is complicated about handling multiple operator precedences. It turns out that there are two approaches we can solve this. One is using the eval statement, which is in fact simpler, especially when we have these multiple different precedences. We'll look at it in a separate video. However, what I'm going to cover here is using loop and lists. And the reason I look at this is because this is a beautiful programming practice. It allows us to understand a lot about Python and logic in a very nice manner. So what we are going to do is that we are going to just, use this approach in this video. And the idea really is that, as we can imagine, first compute all the terms which have the star, which are the multiplication, and then do addition subtraction. We'll see how we develop this. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to make copies of my lists, numbers, and list ops. This may seem, you may wonder why I do this, but there's a very good reason. Notice I'm going to be using these original lists for example, framing the question to the user, determining if the user's answer is correct, and so on and so forth. But all my computations are going to happen from these two lists. So I'm just going to make two copies of these lists. And the way I do that is, well, basically I initialize two empty lists and then append every item, for example, of list numbers to list numbers new, list ops to list ops new. Now, before I get on to writing this code, I'm going to leave you with a food for thought. Why can't we just do list numbers new is equal to list numbers? I'll be very happy to discuss this. You can leave a comment, in this video if you're interested. There's a very good reason why we are having to do all this and not just one single line of code. Let's get on to the code, however. So I get on with I get to my game here. Remember, the first thing, like I said, I'm going to copy this game. I'm going to copy these two lists. But before I do that, even let me just make sure my list operators also contains multiplication, because previously it's only addition subtraction. So I'm going to say let it also have multipliers. And I do that by saying, random.random 0 to 2, because op list 2 is indeed multiply. Now to copy these two lists, I'm going to just say, create a empty list here. So I just call, say, list numbers, say new, and I'm going to create an empty list here. I say list, say ops new, and again create an empty list. And really all I need to do is to just make sure that, all the items are copied over. So I say range, let's say length of list, say numbers, and I just say, list, say numbers new dot append, and list numbers kk. So basically all the items of list numbers will get also appended to the list numbers new. Now I can do the same exact thing for the other list, which is the list of ops. So I just copy this code over and paste it again. This time around I just have to be a little bit careful. This has to be list of ops. The list that I'm updating is also list ops new, ops new, and finally this also has to be list ops. So with this done, I will have two new lists created, populated rather. So I just, let's say I say list numbers new, and I say also print, for example, list ops new. Now let's see this working so that we are sure it's all in place. So I say, please give me a number, say 32. Um, let's just say, for example, plus. I'm going to move forward from here. Notice we can ignore this part for now. Notice here, my first list was the list of numbers. And the second one that I printed here is list of numbers new. And these two are exactly the same. There's no surprise because this code is now working. Like I said, we will be using list numbers new and list ops new for the further computation. But before I write any code with respect to that, let's just try to understand what is it that we do with some examples. Let's say my list numbers new was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and my list ops new was plus, minus, multiply, and plus. Now, really what we need to do here is with this setting, we need to do 10 plus 20 minus 30 times 40 plus 50. Now, because of this 30 times 40, in fact, what I need to do is to first compute 30 times 40. And if I did that, then I'll be 10 plus 20 minus 1200 plus 50. And the interesting bit is that once I have done this multiplication, then I'm left with only plus and minus, which means that I can use my earlier logic to compute it from that point. So what I'm going to do really is that I'm going to find out where my multiplier is and which are the two numbers that are impacted by the multiplier. So for example, multiply here is on index 2. I go and multiply list numbers new 2 to list numbers new 3. So I do 30 times 40 and I replace 30 by 1200 and I go and delete 40. So notice I've trimmed the list, I've adjusted this list numbers new, and also I go and remove the list now, ops new. Now what this does really is that I'm left with list numbers new and list ops new, which have only plus and minus, and this I know very well how to handle. In fact, we've already done this when we handled those long questions. Let's take one more example to make it more clear. Let's say I have two multipliers. In fact, nothing changes. All I need to do is to figure out where my multiplier is, which are the numbers impacted by this. So for example, in this case, 10 and 20, item number 0, item number 1. So I do 10 times 20, 200. I put my list numbers new 0 as 200. I go and remove item 1 of the list numbers new. So I'm left with 200. Likewise, I know there's a multiplier at index number 2. So I go and find out, for example, where is, which are the numbers impacted. So in this case, it's going to be 2 and 3. So I take 1200 here. I'm left with one list numbers new, which is 200, 1200, and 50. And only minus and plus because I've gone and deleted both of these. And again, since I'm left with only minus and plus, I can just use my earlier approach. So the whole idea really is that we do this in two steps. We first compute all the multiplications and adjust our list so that there are no multipliers and also the list of numbers is updated till the time we are left with only add and subtract. Once that happens, we can use the same logic as earlier. Let's do this, in a step-by-step manner. First, let's briefly look at the code. Basically, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to look at my list ops new, and if I find a multiplier in there, and I do not know how many I'll find, so I use a while loop. So it's a while I see a multiplier there. I find out where that multiplier is, and that's say at index. I go and compute the result of the two numbers that are impacted by this, and I can do that because my index is where the multiplier was. My numbers that are impacted are list numbers new index and list numbers new index plus 1. So I multiply these two, store it in result. Now the remaining is just a cleanup. So I remove, for example, list ops new index, and I also go and update the list numbers new. I delete the list numbers new index plus. So now think about this. We've seen it pictorially earlier. We can in fact see this working by writing a little bit of code. It's very logical, very systematic, but we just have to be a little bit careful here. Now the reason like I said, I use the while loop because I do not know how many multipliers I have. For example, in this case, I'm getting 3 multipliers. In some other case, I might get another number of multipliers, right? So I just go and say, well, while let's say this operator is in list, say list ops new, I'm going to find out where this operator is. So I just go and say index is say list ops new, let's say dot index. Now index will tell me the location of that item. So I just go and find this out. Like I said, I'm going to compute a new result here by using list numbers new, IDX multiplied by list, say list numbers new, and I'm going to do IDX plus 1. Having done this, I will first clean up my list ops new. So I'm just going to say delete, let's say list list ops new the item that was at index, because the multiplier needs to be removed so that I can move on to the next multiplier. I need to, however, before that, update my numbers new list. So I'm going to say list numbers new on the index position, wherever the number was. I'm going to say put a result over there because that has already been captured by this number and the next number. And I'm going to delete the, say list, let's say numbers new, say idx plus 1. Now this may look a little bit complicated, but go through the diagram and it makes a lot of sense. Just to understand what's going on, I'm just going to print, let's say, list, say ops new, and let's just do it here. So print, let's say list, say numbers new. And also I'm just going to put an input statement here so that my code comes and stops over here and I can see what's going on. Now at this point of time, my list numbers new and list ops new, the printing is inside the while loop, because they are indented with respect to the while here. So let's see this working. It'll make sense once we start seeing this. So I'm going to just run through this very quickly. So now let's see what's going on here, right? So I started with this list. Remember this print number 90, I printed this. Remember on row number 90, I printed list numbers new, list ops new. My list was 25, 50, 44, 98, 7, 93. There was a multiply to start with. So the first thing that I did was to multiply 25 and 50. That is 1250. I replaced 25 by 1250. I removed 50 from the list. So my new list became 1250, 44, 98, 7, 93. My first multiplier had been taken into account, so I removed this. I was left with plus, multiply, plus, minus. Now again I noticed that there's a multiply here at the second location, which means that I should be doing 44 times 98 here, and that's what I did. So my list now became 1250, 4312, 7 and 93. Now at this point I'm really left with nothing much, because I don't have to go further with this while loop. So I get out of the while loop and I'm left with only plus and minus. Now, having done this, in fact, the next part of the code is actually very simple because we already have seen this. All we have to do really is that, previously we are doing this. All we have to really do is that instead of list of numbers, I'm just going to do all my computations based on list of numbers new, list of ops new. And this part of code is already present for me because it has only plus and minus. So I just go back to my code over here and I say, okay, look, previously I was using list of numbers, and I'm going to now just say list of numbers new. Again, I have to do this with list of ops new because I'm only dealing with plus and minus now. So everywhere I have to just go and change list of ops new here, list of numbers, let's say new, say list of numbers, say for example new, and I think that's about it, right? So pretty much that's what it is. Let's move our input over here so we can make sure that it's kind of making sense for us. Now when I run this code, so what happens is, let's say I run through this plus. Now like I said, we are left with this. So we started with one multiplication which was between 10 and 7, so I got 770 here, and now I'm left with just 85, 58 and so on and so forth with plus and minus alone. I click and enter and my sum comes out as minus 702. In fact, we can verify this. Ignore this for now, we'll fix this. But if I look at my original question, so if I had 85 say minus 58 plus say plus 70 minus say 10 times times 77 and minus 29. Now notice this was my original question because that's right here, right? So minus, plus, minus, multiply, minus. If I were to compute this, that is indeed minus 702. So our logic seems to have worked perfectly fine. And now I have my RHS available here. Now, in fact, we are pretty much done because this was the most challenging part. Now that we have the RHS available, we can now, go ahead and the exact same things will continue. In fact, the question will just form. I can use list numbers for this. In fact, I must use list numbers for the question forming because remember, list numbers new has been modified. So that's why my question comes out quite neatly as we see here. Next, I must make sure that my answer, so I didn't answer this correctly. That's why I got this problem. So if I were to now, let's say, run this code. So I just run through this, say 1232, say plus, Okay, whatever, let's say I just say minus minus. Now I am, so let's say I continue with this. So this is the question being asked. Now my answer in this case is multiply plus uh, minus plus plus. Now you don't have to have six operators, you can have lesser than that, but the ideas will still hold. And indeed it says well done. So my code is completely ready. The only thing that I wanted to highlight is that because I am dealing with number of, so the number of operators that I'm dealing with here, it's hard coded because I was dealing with six, so four works, but in general it's going to be n numbers minus two. So with this my code is in fact, like I said, ready to handle say plus and minus. Now this logic is really really fantastic. I would want you to think a little bit about it. It's quite amazing how we are doing copy of the list and then iterating through the list to remove some of those items and get it all working. I hope you're right. So I hope you found this interesting. And if you think in general, learning Python through activities like this makes you think, makes you appreciate the concepts better, well, do look at our website because we have lots of such activities. Take care, enjoy programming.